Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu emerges as the chairman of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. Indeed, what does this mean for Nigeria? Indeed, Nigeria is the largest economy on the continent of Africa. We'll look to see how this will impact on the development of our country. Welcome to Business Daily. I am Yusuf Akogu. Let's take our business top stories. Glad to have you back. Now, let's give you an update of how the stock market went down on Friday. Of course, the market closed positive on Friday. The index closing strong there at 1.65%. Of course, the all-share index growing way of about 1,000 basis points were added to the index on the day. Of course, the index is like inching closer to that 65,000 basis point all-time high. The market cap also added a few billions of dollars there to close at 34.3 trillion naira. The volume of trade 1.227 billion. Of course, in terms of value, 13.847 billion naira. And of course, the deals, double-digit deals, is no longer new in Nigerian market. It's been a recurrent decimal for the past 3 weeks. 10,393 thousand deals rather happened on the floor on Friday. We look at the gainers for the day. We have, of course, the likes of Presco. Presco closed positive there, 10% to close at 220 naira on the day, of course, followed by FTN Cocoa, 3 naira 90 kobo. It closed 10% gain on the day as well. Omatech as well, 55 kobo to also close positive there at 10%. On the losing side, we have very few equities as well. Multiverse also in the mining sector there, also losing 9.87% to close there, 3 naira 38 kobo, as well as RT Briscoe 66 kobo. It closed on the day. Of course, the margin of loss there 9.59%. Of course, Cordvile also closed at 67 kobo to close at minus 8.22%, all in the negative territory. We look at the top traded equities on the day. Of course, most of them are dominated by the banking sector. First Bank, Taiwan Bank, Wema Bank, Tier 2, and of course FCMB, all in the Tier 2 bank. 132 million volume of shares it traded on the day. Of course, Wema Bank, 121 million volume of shares, and of course FCMB Group also traded 111 million volume of shares. Let's look at the sector performance. Of course, on the day, we have the banking sector. Of course, who is surprised when you have all the banking sector dominating the activities? 3.33% it gained on the day as well. The industrial sector, 1.81% as well as the consumer goods sector, 0.32%. If you go down to the oil and gas sector, 1.06%, and of course the insurance sector gaining the highest on the day, 4.89%. Let's look at the rest of Africa and see how the market in Joburg, Kenya, and Ghana are actually faring. Joburg closed negative 1.19%. Over 800 basis points were actually, lost there from the all-share index there. NSE in Nairobi, Kenya, that is Eastern Africa, closed strong, 1.03%. And of course, if you come down to Ghana here in West Africa, a very closed down neighbor, I would say, 5.18% on the day at its gain. So these are the highlights of the market performance of Friday from Nigeria and, of course, the rest of Africa. We'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll go into our discussion. Don't go away. Glad to have you back. It's the Business Daily right here on Trust Television. Now we're going into our discussion. We have two legs of discussion today. The first one is on the tax reform, and of course the second one is on agriculture and the export viabilities of Nigerian product. But we're going to start with the tax reform because that is key. It's very, very important. If you recall, last week, President Bola Tinubu set up a tax reform committee. And of course, a mandate was actually given to them. The committee is chaired by a renowned tax expert, Taiwo Oyedele. I have my guest joining me in the studio now. Anyebe Idoga, he's the managing director, ID Petros Consult Limited. Glad to have you on Business Daily.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get your immediate reaction to that committee. It seems this government is more concerned about raising revenues.
Not really. I think that the tax reform is a very important step in the right direction because one of the major problems we have in Nigeria is double taxation. You will see that if you move produce from the north, let's say Sokoto, and you are taking just ordinary watermelon, by the time you get to Enugu, the price would have tripled or in 4 places increased because of multiple taxation. Everywhere along the line, somebody wants to take tax. And we suffer this greatly in every aspect of business in Nigeria. You see that you pay taxes everywhere you go, and to a large extent, you don't even see what these taxes are being used for, and that is a major problem, because most of the state government that takes these taxes, we don't see what they do with it, and sometimes even the manner in which taxes are collected by thugs on the road are quite embarrassing and humiliating.
Indeed now. So what do you think should be the immediate mandate now for this kind of committee, given some of the challenges that you have enumerated?
I think the committee will need to interact with the state government and even the local government to harmonize the way taxes will be collected. There have been several committees in the past. There was a time that we participated in a committee at the Ministry of Agriculture to see how multiple taxation could be eliminated. And it was quite revealing when you listen to transporters and you listen to farmers and the marketers, what they go through. And if you go to industries, it's the same thing. The story is the same thing all over. And it's quite frustrating doing business with so much tax burden. So I think in the laws, there are some taxes that are exclusive to the local government to collect. Some are exclusive to the state government and some to the federal government. So no matter how you want to do the reform, you must carry these tiers of government along for you to get good result. And I think that is what this committee should do. Beyond the federal government, they should look at the state government and have a harmonious position on the tax reform.
Now, okay, you talked about multiple taxation. There's also a high prevalence of tax evasion as well. That is another problem that we're actually facing. And it's a window where government is losing so much in terms of revenue. So what do you think can be done to, curb that? And most of the people involved, most cases are high-profile individuals.
Beside even tax evasion, even the taxes that are collected are not fully accounted for. Then, yes, we have a lot of people that are outside the tax net. That is there. If you look at the last administration, I think they did quite well by bringing a lot of people into the tax net. And you can see the performance of the tax bodies under that administration. And I think that what this government will do is to go further by bringing more people onto the tax net and ensuring that they are paid and that the taxes paid are equally accounted for. That is one of the problems we have again. A lot of taxes that are collected are not really accounted for. The government is not even getting benefit from those taxes. So while we are bringing more people on board to ensure that these taxes are collected, we should equally ensure that the taxes are collected in the format and in the way that it will be accounted for.
Now, indeed, interesting submission there. Do you think maybe it's the lack of coordination between the fiscal and, of course, the economic policies? That is why perhaps we are not getting this thing right.
I think it's not just about lack of coordination. I think it's more of our attitude. Sometimes we try to cut corners in many things that we do as a people. No proper accountability. So what they should ensure is proper accountability. And I think the one way to do it is to use information technology, IT, to ensure that cash are not paid. Make it difficult for people, even if they are interested in taking this fund, make it difficult for them to take it. I think that is the way that we should go. But if you leave it open the way it has always been, you want to collect tax, you give receipt, you give cash, the way we pay, there's no way you can equally effectively account for it. These are the challenges.
Indeed, quite an interesting submission there on tax. Then we switch topic now and look at the Nigeria commodities and, of course, indeed, our export viabilities. For a very long time, many have even asked that we are not even growing enough to feed the local population. Why are we talking about exports? What is your reaction to that?
Yes, I support the view that we should be able to produce sufficiently to take care of the needs of the country, while we equally produce some for export. But what is important is that we must be able to feed ourselves first. And like I said some minutes ago, our problem is for us to effectively control what we do without bringing some element of selfishness and self-interest into it. And how do we, let me make reference to the Anchor Borrowers Program, for instance. The program started in 2016, honestly, it was launched in 2015.
November.
Yes. But when you get to 2016, when this program started I think it started at KB State, you will see that to a large extent, the program achieved its purpose in the first, second cycle of operation. Rice was produced. If you look at the report...
I remember the lake rice then, Lagos KB rice.
KB rice. Rice was actually produced. But after the first, second cycle, they introduced something like prime anchor and brought in the big boys. Now we began to have problems because it becomes like more or less like a cash cow for everybody that needs money to come in. Money were given out, and you cannot really verify whether they were used for the purpose for which they were taken. That became a problem. But if we're able to control what we're doing, I think by now we would have been far beyond where we are. You see, when you're talking about agric produce, there are things that we must look at critically. Number one is, how do we bring down the price of food? When we talk of inflation, the greatest problem in inflation is food inflation, because everybody must eat. Whether you are poor, you are rich, you must eat. So if food has gone beyond the reach of the poor people, then the country has more serious problem to contend with.
Absolutely.
So what do? Government should focus on mass production of food at this point, so that we can bring down the prices of stable foods in Nigeria. Once we achieve that, then we can now put our energy on production for export. I think that will make more sense to me than exporting while you can't feed your country.
Even when in most cases some of our exported agro-allied products are rejected, about 82% of them are actually rejected according to Nigerian Shippers Council. Then you talked about producing for local population now, before we talk about export. Another challenges facing government, farmers especially, is insecurity. They can't even go to their farms right now. How can we achieve that?
You see, I agree that there are security problems in some places. There's no doubt about that. But the major problems that farmers have in most places is not just the security. The problem is that they don't even have money to farm. I am a farmer. You understand? I have my farm, I run farms, and I manage farm for people. The problem we have is that these farmers can't get fertilizer. These farmers cannot get even tractor. If you look for tractor now and said, okay, we want tractor to go and cultivate 10 hectares, you might look for it for the next 1 month, you will not get tractor.
Wow.
Because the tractor density is so low that tractors are not available. These are the real challenges.
Even with your money.
Yes, even with your money, you can't get. So these are the real challenges. Then we have government subsidizing input, which, yes, as at the time it was introduced, we expected it to serve its purpose, and it did serve some purpose. But now we have seen that subsidizing input is more prone to corruption than when you subsidize output. But you cannot have an output when there's no input.
Input, absolutely.
So what then should government do? Government should ensure that there is availability of fund to farmers, so that when they take this fund and they were able to produce, then government can subsidize them based on their output. At that level, corruption will be less. But when you are now buying fertilizer and you said, like, I will still make reference to the last administration, they had a deal with Morocco and they brought in fertilizer. And the fertilizers were supposed to be sold at 5,000 to 6,000. But the real farmers cannot access this fertilizer at 5,000, not even at 7,000.
The smallholder farmers.
The smallholder farmers. So this fertilizer will be bought by some middlemen and still sold to them at a higher price.
Yes, absolutely.
So the aim was defeated. And these are the challenges we've been having with the agricultural sector. If you look at whatever you want to do in agric, for instance, you must be able to produce sufficient arable. Because if you are talking about livestock production, they are going to feed on this arable. You are talking about poultry. You are going to make their feed from maize, soybean, granite or soya cake,
absolutely,
and some other things that are cultivated. And the prices of these things are very high. But that government had stopped the importation is to create opportunities for us to produce. Now we are finding it difficult to produce because largely, state governors are not interested. And the federal government cannot do it all alone.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you that no matter how this government tries, they won't succeed unless they have buy-in of the state governors.
Indeed, very interesting summation there as well. What will you suggest? In every state that you go in Nigeria, especially in the northern states, you have one crop that are peculiar to some of these states. Do you think the state governors can actually, come up in a way that we can project one state, one crop policy?
One state, one crop might not even be the issue. There are states that can grow virtually every arable, and they can even do much more than just one crop. So what I will suggest is that the state governors should own the agricultural projects, take it over and run it. The federal government do not have land. The lands belong to the state government.
Exactly. So do we need a federal Ministry of Agriculture at the center?
Yes. So the Federal Ministry of Agriculture is essentially a policy-making body. But when
should
this
be involved directly?
Yeah, normally they don't involve themselves directly, but sometimes they try to subsidize produce, and some of us are not seeing much of that. And that is, we're not seeing it. But the issue is this. Let state governors stand up, own agriculture, key into federal government policy. And what they can do is, okay, tell federal government, we don't have money to finance this. Let them guarantee fund through ISPO. Take the fund from federal government and engage their people based on their own project and produce what they can produce in their state. And an average farmer must be protected. And I think farmers are protected all over the world. And the reason is not far-fetched. Now, you ask farmers to go and get loan. They struggle to get loan themselves. They produce this year. And because many of them produce maize and there are no storage facilities and the supply outweigh the demand, the price crash.
Yeah, exactly.
Number one, they won't be able to pay their loans. And number two, they run into losses. Now, how do you protect them? Government must have a policy to protect them. That is one. Then number two, to take care of the security situation where they have security concerns. What I expected the state government to do is to cultivate a large, vast land and have at least 1,000 farmers in a location, cultivating, let's say, 10,000 hectares in a single location, doing 1 or 2 or 3 crops based on their design.
More like a cluster farming.
A cluster farming. Then let civil defense provide security for them. It will be less cheaper. When they are coming in the morning, the civil defense are there. When they are coming in the night, they're going back, they are there. So that will mitigate the issue of security. But when you leave farmers to go to their farm at different locations, few on the farm, then they can easily be harassed. So all these things still boils down to the state government. They have to take this seriously. And when they do that, we will succeed. And I don't think we need more than 2 years to make a difference. Because we're talking about maize, we talk about guinea corn, sorghum and all that. These things are between 1 to 120 days. And they are harvested. So if you produce 10,000 hectares in one location, and you do that maybe in every senatorial district in your state, then you're talking about 30,000. And if every state does that based on what they have the advantage to produce, then the price of goods will definitely come down. Because the output now is what government is going to subsidize. You will now say, okay, instead of giving you fertilizer, subsidizing your input by 100,000, when you produce XY amount, for each ton, government will give you this amount. So if I produce 10 tons and government is given, let's say 100,000 per ton or 50,000 per ton, then I get 500,000. Then I can sell my produce at a lower price and still make profit.
Make profit.
That's how it should go.
Indeed, interesting conversation we're having. Time is always not our friend, most times on this program. But before we go, a new government is not so new again. I've spent over a month in office, and so many policies have been introduced so far. So what do you think government should do with regard to some of the points that you've raised to ensure that we have food security?
I
Just
think
in 30 seconds.
Okay, the federal government has started doing something. Some state government are doing. I know that the Niger state government is working on getting some tractors. I know that some other states again are doing some things on agriculture. My advice is that they should continue with this. But the federal government, to have good result, must recapitalize the Bank of Agriculture, number one. Number two, the federal government must put proper management in place at the Bank of Agriculture. Once you have these two things in place, and the Bank of Agriculture is positioned to operate effectively, I can tell you that they will do much more than you can expect.
Absolutely. I must thank you. Anyembe Idoga, Managing Director, ID Petros Consult Limited. I must thank you for your time on Business Daily today. We appreciate your contribution.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's on that note that we wrap up the Business Daily edition for today. Join us tomorrow for more. I am Yusuf Akogun.